Imagine a confident police officer pulling over a tall, imposing man on the side of the road to issue a ticket. With an arrogant tone, he's ready to assert his authority, but in the next second, his face turns pale. Why? Because the man he just pulled over isn't just anyone. He's an FBI agent. This is an instant karma moment that will leave you shaking your head. That morning, Officer Steve started his day the same way he had every day before. With the sun just rising over the horizon, the streets of the small town where he served felt quiet and peaceful. Behind the wheel of his patrol car, Steve found comfort in his routine. No surprises, no major drama. As a police officer with over 5 years of experience, he felt he knew every corner of the town, every street, and every driver who passed by. The job wasn't particularly difficult, but its monotony gave Steve room to let his mind wander, occasionally daydreaming about his rather uninteresting personal life. However, the morning silence was suddenly shattered when a sleek black car sped past, far exceeding the speed limit. Steve, well accustomed to such violations, immediately turned on his siren. There was no second thought. He saw the offense and acted instantly. The black car, now forced to pull over to the side of the road, fueled Steve's resolve to take firm action. He hoped to wrap this up quickly so he could return to his routine without further interruptions. Steve drove his patrol car closer, his eyes scanning the stopped vehicle. It looked luxurious, unlike most of the cars he usually pulled over. A black sedan with a glossy finish and what appeared to be brand new license plates. As he stepped out of his car, he noticed no signs of nervousness or anxiety from the driver. A man sat behind the wheel, his face remarkably calm. He was dressed in a formal suit, wearing dark sunglasses, and looked exceptionally well-groomed. Not the typical person involved in a traffic violation. Steve walked toward the car with a firm stride, trying to project authority and seriousness. "Good morning, sir," he said, looking at the man. "Are you aware that you were exceeding the speed limit?" The man showed no signs of panic. Instead, he responded with a faint smile that slightly caught Steve off guard. "I know," the man replied briefly, "but I'm in a hurry." Steve simply nodded, though a small doubt crept into his mind. Suspicion started to rise, but he continued with the standard procedure he was accustomed to. The man did not overreact. Without further words, he opened the glove compartment and retrieved his driver's license and vehicle registration. In a neutral tone, he handed over the documents Steve had requested. Deep down, Steve felt a bit puzzled. Usually, traffic violators would appear at least slightly nervous or uneasy. But this man, despite knowing he had broken the law, remained calm and composed. Steve felt as if he was dealing with someone completely different from the usual cases. However, that only reinforced his belief that the man needed to be penalized for his violation. Without further hesitation, Steve decided to proceed with the usual ticketing process. After asking the man to step out of the car, Steve decided to conduct a further inspection. "Please step out of the vehicle, sir," he said in a slightly firmer tone, trying to assert his authority. The man didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at Steve for a moment with an unreadable expression before opening his car door. Moving calmly, he stood up and stepped out. Steve observed him closely but remained puzzled by his composure. Shouldn't someone who had just been pulled over feel at least a little surprised or nervous? Yet this man acted as if it were just another ordinary day. Steve examined the man more closely. He appeared far more refined and sophisticated than most people Steve typically encountered on the road. His black suit was made of expensive fabric, and he stood tall, as if he was accustomed to formal situations. Steve felt slightly unsettled by how impeccably put together the man was, like someone who would never be in legal trouble. Nonetheless, he stayed focused on his duty. "I have to handle this violation according to procedure," Steve thought, even as an odd feeling began to creep into his mind. While writing the ticket, Steve asked again, "Do you realize how dangerous it is to drive at that speed on this road?" The man simply gave a small nod, as if he understood but showed no remorse. "Yes, I do," he replied, "but I'm on an important trip." Steve noted everything down on the citation without much comment. Something about the situation unsettled him, but he tried to ignore it. He believed that his role as a police officer meant always doing the right thing, even if it sometimes required making unpopular decisions. As Steve was about to write the final details on the ticket, the man looked at him intently. For a brief moment, Steve felt a tension in the air, as if something was off. However, due to his strong sense of confidence, he didn't dwell on it too much. He believed that nothing was more important than enforcing the law firmly and fairly. Everyone who breaks the rules must face the consequences, he reminded himself. Unknowingly, he had overlooked something crucial. The man he was ticketing was no ordinary person. As Steve finished writing the ticket, he looked at the man once more. "Please sign this ticket as acknowledgement that you accept the fine," he said in a more relaxed tone. However, the man did not immediately take the ticket. Instead, he gave a faint smile and, for the first time, spoke words that would completely shock Steve. "Before I sign, you might want to take a look at this," he said, reaching into his jacket and pulling out an identification card from his pocket. Steve's once confident face suddenly turned pale as he read what was written on the card. A prominent FBI logo. Steve stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the FBI identification card the man was holding. In his mind, everything seemed to pause for a moment. That card radiated an authority far greater than he had ever imagined. The FBI logo was not something to be taken lightly. Steve felt as if his entire body had been paralyzed by the silence. He had believed he understood the power he wielded as a police officer, but now he realized he was dealing with someone far more influential than himself. The man observed the change in Steve's expression with a calm gaze, as if he had predicted this reaction. "My name is James," he said in a low, controlled voice. "I'm an FBI agent on an important mission. I assume you wouldn't want to create a bigger problem, would you?" The atmosphere between them grew more tense. Steve felt as if the world had begun to move in slow motion. He, a police officer accustomed to enforcing the law with his own hands, now felt uneasy under the piercing stare of an agent with far greater power. Steve tried to steady himself, struggling to find the right words. "But you were exceeding the speed limit," he said, though his voice sounded more uncertain than before. James merely raised an eyebrow, unaffected by the statement. "Of course I was," he replied calmly. "However, you should be more careful with whom you're dealing. I could end your career with a single phone call." Those words echoed in Steve's mind, sending a chilling sensation down his spine. He had never imagined finding himself trapped in a situation like this. A tense silence enveloped them. Steve, who had previously felt superior in his role as a police officer, now could only stare at James with growing anxiety. James didn't rush to say more, giving Steve time to reflect. "I have no intention of reporting this incident," James finally said. "However, this is a lesson you should remember. In this world, not everyone who breaks the law is just an ordinary person. Always be cautious about who you're dealing with." James's voice, calm yet filled with meaning, made Steve realize the gravity of his mistake. With a deep breath, James stepped back into his car. There was no hatred or anger on his face, only an extraordinary composure. Meanwhile, Steve remained frozen in place, his confusion deepening. Slowly, he returned to his patrol car, but his steps felt heavier. His heart was weighed down by a profound sense of shame. All this time, he had believed his authority was absolute, but now he understood how quickly karma could strike, dismantling the confidence he had built. That incident would be a lesson that would haunt him long after the day had ended.